I began lecturing 300 days out of each year for the last 5 years. And my wife and my mother said, look, we'll support you if you want to do something that crazy, but we're going to ask you to do a few things for us. And I said, okay, whatever you guys want to get that support, I'll do it. And the only thing they really asked me to do that was unusual was to have a hobby, so that if I really got off the deep end and got excited where they were going to come after me with a butterfly net and haul me away, that I'd get this hobby out of the briefcase, study it, and calm myself down. So I said, okay, that's fair. And I sat down, and I started making a list of possible hobbies, and I looked at doing crossword puzzles. Well, that's good mental exercise, might help me, but didn't help anybody else. And so I went through a whole list of things, trying to find a hobby that would help other people, and I finally settled on collecting obituaries of doctors. Now, as crazy as that sounds, it has a positive value. Because if doctors knew what they were talking about when it comes to health, nutrition, longevity, and that kind of thing, if you separate them out from the general population in America, they should be healthier and live longer, right? If they knew what they were doing. So I did that. I went to the medical library at the medical school at San Diego, at La Jolla, north end of town, and I spent a week in there going through all these statistics and the surveys that were done on causes of death in doctors and longevity studies and things. And what I found out was pretty shocking. The average lifespan for medical doctors in America is 58. 58. The average lifespan for the average person in America is 75.5. So you can gain 20 years statistically by not going to medical school. I brought you a few of my favorites so you'd see what I'm talking about. Dr. Stuart Cartwright here, age 38, dropped dead in his home in San Diego from a ruptured coronary aneurysm, a swelling or a ballooning of the artery in the heart. And of course, a aneurysm is a breakdown of the elastic fibers in the artery, and you get a ballooning in that weakened area, much like a car or truck tire. When you hit a chuck hole and you break the cords and you get a ballooning of that area, it's very weak and will blow. I always say that Dr. Stuart Cartwright here died of something even a turkey wouldn't die from, because 1957 we learned from a turkey study what causes aneurysms. The USDA felt that they knew enough about turkey nutrition at that time. They were able to take turkeys off of the range and put them on concrete or wire, and they built this pellet to do that. And in the first 13 weeks in this pilot project where they had 250,000 turkeys on it, in the first 13 weeks, farmers were out there every morning picking them up by the bushel baskets full, taking them to the state diagnostic lab to see what they died from. When they opened them up for the autopsy, every one of them, 125,000 of them, had died of a ruptured aortic aneurysm. And one of the clever pathologists says, you know, that's got to be due to a copper deficiency, because copper is required to manufacture elastic fibers and also maintain the strength in arteries and skin and other tissues in the body. So they doubled the amount of copper in there. And the next year they tried to raise 500,000 turkeys, and not a single one of those turkeys died from a ruptured aneurysm. They went from a 50% loss to a 0 loss just simply by doubling the amount of copper in there. They got very excited about this, and they started studying copper deficiency diseases in humans and a variety of species of animals. And again, to make a long story short, what they found out was this. The first symptom of a copper deficiency in human beings is white, gray, or silver hair. Even in the dark, I see a lot of copper deficiency in this room. Now, the medical profession would say, well, just color your hair. You're going to treat the symptom, even though you have serious things going on the inside. And if you don't take this warning, if you don't heed this warning from your body and don't start supplementing with some colloidal copper, what happens is you begin to get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in your skin, and you get crow's feet around the corners of your eyes and the corners of your mouth. Parts of your anatomy begin to sag, and you know you're in trouble when you go to your doctor for a physical and he says, you know, I've got a golf buddy, I mean a colleague down the hall here who's a plastic surgeon, and for $10,000 he'll make you look 20 years younger. He can give you a facelift, a booby lift, a tummy tuck, a derriere lift, and you don't need any of that surgery. Really all you need is some colloidal copper, and everything will come back up like you have a hydraulic jack under it. Now, if you don't do something about it at that point, you get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in the large veins of your legs, and you get varicose veins. And if you don't heed the warning there, you get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in your exhaust pipe, you get hemorrhoids. So if you have hemorrhoids, varicose veins, skin wrinkles or things that sag, gray, white, or silver hair, the odds are you have some aneurysms growing in you somewhere. And don't be one of these people who dies suddenly and all your friends get together at Denny's, you know, after the funeral. They're all still dressed up in their glad rags, and they say, you know, we never would have thought that Frank would be the first one to go. I mean, this guy was Mr. Fitness. He jogged every morning. He belonged to the health club, went and did aerobics 3 times a week. He had his little bike at home, did his thing. He was a vegetarian. I mean, this guy was Mr. Fitness. He always looked so handsome, so distinguished in his gray hair. Now, another one of my favorites is Dr. Martin Carter. He was age 57, died 1 year before the average for physicians, and he was an expert according to the New York Times obituaries. Now, he had every drop of medical education you could get in the whole world. Let's see here. He got his undergraduate degree, his pre-med stuff from Dartmouth, you can't say the R's up in New England, from Dartmouth College. He received his MD from Harvard up at Boston, and he got his PhD degree in medicine from Yale. He had every drop of medical education you get in the whole world, but he didn't have expensive urine. The cause of death was a ruptured aortic aneurysm, just like those copper-deficient turkeys. Now, this guy here, I have to give you a quick quote so you won't think ill of me before I show you his obituary. Clarence Darrow was very famous. He was kind of a F. Lee Bailey, a trial attorney a defense attorney back in the 20s, and he was made famous by a variety of trials, including the Scopes monkey trial in Tennessee. And the prosecutor who always fought him in court was William Jennings Bryan. Both of them were great orators, and they were always fighting each other in court and on the lecture circuit and whatnot. And a week after that trial, William Jennings Bryan had actually won the trial. The prosecution won, and he died suddenly after that trial. And all the reporters and all the media ran and rushed to Clarence Darrow because they knew they had this blood feud between them. And he said, well, wow, you must have really been rough on William Jennings Bryan because he just died just shortly after that trial. And Clarence Darrow knew this was the last chance he'd have to take a dig at his old buddy, and he knew that if he died first, it would be the other way around. So this is a very famous quote. Here's what he said, quote, "Oh, I hate to see anybody die, but there have been a few obituaries I've enjoyed reading," unquote. That's kind of how I feel about this guy. Dr. Thomas Beam, age 48, died 10 years before the average for physicians, 30 years before the average for the average American on the street. He was an expert, according to the New York Times obituaries, and he died of a simple cardiomyopathy heart attack, a selenium deficiency. And not only was he an expert, he was an FDA expert. Why would you want to listen to anything the FDA had to say about health and nutrition when their experts are dying of selenium deficiency disease at age 48? My mother's favorite obituary, and of course my mother's 76 years old, and she collects these things when I'm out on the road. She gets all these newspaper subscriptions from all around the Midwest. And when I get home, I always have this envelope, a plain brown envelope that says personal and confidential. And she's got obituaries of politicians, lawyers, and doctors in there. I mean, she's expanded the theory, right? And so this is her favorite. Dr. Gail Clark, 47, was not only a cardiologist, she was the chief cardiologist of her own hospital. And she was walking down the halls of her own hospital with her stethoscope. "Hi, I'm Dr. Gail Clark, chief cardiologist. Here's my stethoscope." Boom! She dropped dead right there in the hospital. And all her colleagues, they're screaming for code carts and residents and interns and house doctors. And everybody's trying to save Dr. Clark, the chief cardiologist. And they're trying to save her next to you, and you hear all this activity, and you hear them cutting the clothes off this patient, an emergency going on, and you hear them say, "Okay, bring up the paddles, turn it on, okay, put on contact gel, everybody clear here, clear everybody, here we go." It didn't work, so they say, "Okay, turn it up to the next step, more contact gel, clear everybody," and they turn on the monitor. So you hear, the flat line, so you know they're dead, and your monitor is going beep, 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 because you're nervous. You're a heart patient. And you say, nurse, what happened next door? I heard all this chaos and screaming and everything. And they say, "Well, your cardiologist, the chief cardiologist of this hospital, Dr. Gail Clark, age 47, just croaked next door from a cardiomyopathy heart attack." You can see all the patients holding their gowns, and they're running out of the hospital as fast as they can go. Because whatever the chief got, they don't want. I mean, man, if you can't save the chief with it, why would you want it? Now, you'd like to think that somebody who won the Nobel Prize in Medicine would at least live to be the average of 75.5. This guy here was the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Prize in Medicine. He was 38 years old. 37. 37 years old, won the Nobel Prize in Medicine. 11 years later, he died of a cardiomyopathy heart attack, simple selenium deficiency disease. So I always tell people, whatever a doctor tells you, do the opposite and you'll live longer. Yeah. Now, remember my job when I came back from Africa was to find an early warning system. And I believe I found it. It's not an exotic animal like a koala bear, a wallaby, or anything like that, or a hummingbird, or maybe we have a drug dealer in the group. He's either licensed or unlicensed, but he's a drug dealer.